he mentioned Hattie Meadows working in her garden every day. How many people really want to work in their garden every day? How do you want to work in it all day? Or would you rather have time just enjoying the garden? That's a lot of what this is going to be about today. It's also going to be how we can leave the planet in better condition than it is now for our kids and grandkids, which is important. I tell my landscape guys that, while a lot of people might see doctors as important because they heal us, if we don't have a planet to live on, it doesn't matter how healthy we are if the planet is dying. So I tell them, don't be ashamed of the fact they're out there getting dirty, in the mud, the heat, the cold. They are helping to save the planet. So that's a lot of what today's going to be about. It's also going to be a little bit about the birds and the bees. So if you don't know about the birds and the bees, you're going to learn about it today. Okay. So first of all, we want to talk about what native plants are. Native plants are basically plants who are already adapted to the climate because they came from here. Now, sometimes you will see people talk about native plants and they think the crepe myrtle is native because they see it all over the South. They think the Japanese azaleas are native because they see them on the Masters, on TV, and all over. A lot of our landscape plants are adapted, but they weren't from here. All right, so the typical way to find native, they were here when Columbus showed up, roughly. Okay, so that's kind of the general accepted rule. Okay, go next. So you see here, there's ecoregions, and it's maybe a little hard to see on here, but this little green area down here that says 8.3, that is considered our ecoregion, which is the Southeast Plains. Some people consider Southeast Piedmont, but if you notice, it goes down towards the Gulf and back up on the other side of the mountains. That is the zone that's basically, acclimated for us in our area. So you don't have to feel like to plant in your garden that it has to be specifically North Carolina, because plants move north and south with the climate. How many people know about the Franklinia tree? Do you know the story behind it? I'm going to share it with others unless one of you three want to stand up and tell it. The Franklinia tree was discovered in Georgia along the banks of the Watamaha River back in Ben Franklin's time. That's why it's got the name. The guy who discovered it with Bartram was a friend of Benjamin Franklin, so he named it Franklinia Watamaha. All right. They collected seeds and flowers, and they went and pressed them. And they take them back to their lab, and they figure out what the family name is and what key it out. And then they went back a few years later, and there were none of them alive. So all the Franklinias we have now today came from those original seeds that he collected back in the 1700s. Okay, it's considered native because it was found at that right time period. However, they believe it moved south with glaciers from Canada because the fossils are up in Canada. All right, but they're not in Canada either anymore, and that tree is basically extinct in the wild. So I say all that to say that plants move north and south is kind of an arbitrary line that we've kind of used to say that they've been here 500 years. They were here 500 years ago. They're probably native and acclimated to our climate. So don't get too caught up in, is it native to Durham County? An example is, you can go to the USDA website and it shows the northern red oak is not native to Durham County, but it's native to Wake, Johnson, Orange, Vance, every county around us. What that means is nobody who officially was a plant person found it in Durham County, North Carolina, and said, oh, there's one over here, let's check off the boxes in Durham County. It's kind of like whenever there's a tornado, it's not a tornado unless a policeman saw it. Everybody knows it was a tornado until an official says it was. So don't get too caught up in that. A lot of people are purists and say, they get something like right here, get the seed from here, or whatever. We have a broader view because as climate change happens, things are going to move north and south a little bit. So generally speaking, we use this kind of lighter green area right here, the 8.3 section, as what we consider native to use in gardens around here. All right, next. So here, this is another thing too, you go to websites, anybody goes here, go to Plant Delights?
Yeah.
Well, glad you didn't go today, because there's an open house this weekend, so, you wouldn't be here. He sells across the country, so if he lists stuff native, it could be native in New Mexico, and it lists native. So just because it's native to the United States, it could be native to a different part of the country. So don't get too hot, when you look, the best thing to do is take the scientific name on Google, scientific name, USDA, and go to the USDA website, and that will tell you exactly where they consider it native. All right, next. All right, so this is an example of how you can look at things that we have here already growing everywhere these are vines in this example. They are not native, but they're taking over and killing trees, but we have alternatives that are native that will feed the pollinators and give you beauty, but not destroy the environment. All right, this happens to be the end of Invasive Plant Awareness Week. Anybody know that? Okay, well, give you an example of how bad invasive plants are. In about a week or two, the bradford pears are going to be growing everywhere. You see trees alongside the road that are white, that are blooming. They're not dogwoods, they bloom before the dogwoods. And those are an example of invasive plants that are taking over. All right, next. So why are they important? Okay, so when you plant a native plant, it's going to be something that's going to be easier to take care of because it's generally, in our area, it handles our climate. But also, it can be native to the coast. Doesn't mean it will grow here. Okay, it could. For example, if you have something that grows in the swamps down east, and you have a low wetland area, you could grow it here just fine. All right. Hemlocks are considered a northern or mountain plant. All right. Anybody been to Hemlock Bluffs in Cary?
Yeah.
It's a remnant of that are there. Mountain laurel considered a mountain plant, but they're on the south bank of the Eno River. Anybody ever noticed those before? You ever wonder why they're not in the north bank? It's on a slope facing away from the sun. It can handle the cooler climate. The roots don't bake in the sun like they would on this side where it's turned to the sun. So it's a mountain plant that will grow here in the right condition. Okay? North facing slope, a lot of shade, you probably can grow. So again, that's why I don't get too hung up on this specifically, because you might like a mountain laurel. You might like rhododendron. They may grow in your spot fine. Mountain laurel are actually, there's some down on the other side of Clayton along this stream bed that are taller than the ceiling. They're a naturally occurring mountain laurel there that probably has a little bit different genetics and can handle the heat a little bit more. So again, don't get too caught up on whether or not it's native in your neighborhood or whatever if you want to feed it, because insects and birds move as well and they need to have that food source. Yeah, go ahead next. All right, so here's a really important thing to see. You see over on the very left in purple lawn? You see how short those roots are and how short that plant is? Native plants, though, will start down and the roots will go down. They will break up our clay soils. That will allow more water penetration, less runoff, so we get less flooding. Taller tops, which also will help dry out the soil. When I say dry it out, like make it so that you have a dry sponge to soak up the water when it does rain, and do a lot more for the environment because again they bloom and things like that. The reason that is important, with the roots is because 200 years ago we had decent topsoil all over the state, pretty much. Okay. I live over here in downtown Durham. My house was built in 1901. It never got scraped off. It never got farmed. It probably never really got timbered, so to speak, or whatever. You go this far down before you hit clay in my yard. Okay? Because it was never destroyed. The reason we have so much clay here is the topsoil is in the ocean. Okay? These deep-rooted plants will help start to change that soil back over into topsoil and get it to where more things grow because they're acclimated to it. Because if they were growing originally where maybe you had 6 inches of good soil, they still grow down into the clay. All right? So they can handle our clay. You don't have to do as much work to get the native plants to grow. And we'll get a little bit later into more about soils, but that gives you the basic idea of why a lot of these native plants are so much better than lawn. All right, next. I feel like I moved through it very fast too, so if you guys have questions, don't feel like you can't, raise your hand. Okay, so here's the contrast in having a native plant yard with pollinators and stuff like that versus the guy over here who's mowing his yard every Saturday whether or not he wants to or not. He's got a little bit of green shrubs there, almost no color, got a tree, but over here, this guy's over here enjoying it. He's not having to mow it. Most of the time, you get lots of different color, different seasons. I can look at pictures of my backyard and tell you almost within 2 weeks of when the picture was taken, based on the combination of what's blooming. All right, that's because I've had it a while, but it's a whole lot more fun than to be a slave to that lawnmower. Every week, whether or not it rains, whether or not it's hot, whether it's dry, whatever, you gotta get out there and mow that. And it's not supporting wildlife. A lot of your wildlife is gonna prefer that one on the left. All right, next. Here's another graphic that kind of explains, you see all the different insects in the top one versus what you have in the bottom, which those I call green meatballs or green mustache at the bottom. Very, very boring. And unfortunately, most landscape companies, I almost don't like to say I'm a landscaper, to be honest. I feel like most of the landscape industry is a big con game. Put a whole bunch of lawn out there, and then you pay me every week to come mow it. You pay me to come fertilize it. You pay me to aerate it every fall, overseed every fall. I put bushes under here that are gonna grow into the windows, okay? Might grow this tall, but we're cutting them to here. So now you gotta pay me a couple times a year to come and prune them. All right? I like when we do our garden so you don't see me again. It manages itself to take care of it. But you get all this diversity and stuff like that. The more you can do, the more insects and birds you're gonna feed. All right, next. All right, this is a graphic that shows a little bit of, it's picked 5 different, insects and how far they fly to find food. Who cares how far a bee has to go to find food? Okay, you really do. That was supposed to be But I'll give you an example. For one thing, where are honeybees from? Europe. Hey, we got some educated people in here. Most people don't know that honeybees aren't from here at all. All right? In California, they have huge almond groves. Acres of almonds. In order to pollinate those almond trees, so you have almonds in the store, they had to bring boxes of bees in and send them out everywhere because the bees can only fly so far. When the almond trees are done blooming, they gotta take those out or the bees are not gonna have food because they can't fly enough to get food. All right? So, as you see some of these things, 500 feet is all that little bee's gonna fly to find food. All right? Most yards are what? Maybe 100, 200 feet across or whatever. So it's important to have bridges from one garden to another that will support these insects, or they can't go find food, they can't reproduce, they can't do that. I have a little problem with this because I know monarch butterflies fly to Mexico every year. But when they're trying to feed, That's what they're gonna do, they're a little bit farther. So it's important, every yard can have a little patch of pollinator plants that will feed something, and they can go from one to the other and breed and reproduce and things like that. All right, next one. Okay, one of my big pet peeves. Who's already mulched their yard this year? You can admit it, I'm not gonna make it too hard on you. This is one of the most sterile environments you can ever have, okay? They're freshly mulching in the bottom left. Actually, before I go too far, and I don't wanna forget this. The upper left, it may be hard to see from where you're sitting, that is dyed mulch. So you guys already know, but some may not. Dyed mulch is usually ground up wood pellets, often have arsenic in the wood to treat it. All right, and then they dye it pretty so they can sell it rather than just throw it away. All right, so when you go to Home Depot, I hate the red mulch at Home Depot. I mean, you just want to put your sunglasses on and you go buy it, just like, and a lot of it, I'm not picking on Home Depot, although I think they have too much orange. But, you know, it's just gaudy, all right? The black mulch is the same way. You say, well, at least it's not red. Well, it's still dyed, and it's still probably wood that's got chemicals in it that they chopped up and sold in order to not have to take it to a landfill and make some money off of it. But going back to the overall thing about mulch, there is no benefit to this, and please don't do the bottom middle with the mulch volcano. I see that way too much, but that is basically still dead space, okay? And we're gonna get that a little bit more in another slide, but I wanted to say this is what a lot of typical landscapers will do. They will charge you every year to come mulch. Again, a big fun game. I haven't mulched my yard, I've been in my house 22 years, and I know it's been at least 15 years since I mulched it. At least. If I do, it's a couple little areas, and even then I don't use mulch. Mulch is bark most of the time, or chopped up wood in the case of it. Bark is meant to shed water to protect the tree. Okay? So you put a 3-inch layer of bark, it wants to shed the water. All right? It doesn't want to absorb the water. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Leaf mold, on the other hand, which is what I like to use in particularly perennial gardens, holds 5 times the water. You only need to put it about that deep to do that, to just dress up bare areas. And it's going to break down and feed the organisms you want in your yard versus this constant mulching. The people who lived in my house before I was there, I had about this much in the front yard where they mulched it probably every year, that I could not get to hold water for nothing. It would pour down rain. July thunderstorm, you go out there and stir up the dirt and just dust, because it would repel the water. Yes?
Could you put wood chips in the mulch category? Wood chips.
Okay, so a lot of people use the tree service wood chips to prep a yard. That's a great way to get started, but I wouldn't keep doing it. Okay? Because that breakdown of the wood chips, it uses nitrogen, and it takes it away from the plants that you might want to plant. So it's too raw. Just like if you had compost, it's too hot and up in aged enough, it'll burn the plant, stuff like that. So wood chips is good to start, to build, especially if you got clay and you've got 6 to 9 months before you're gonna plant. It's a really good way to build up organic material and get going, and it's free. You do have to be careful because they will drop it off when you least expect it. Maybe block your car in or block your car out. And you may get more than you know what to do with, and you're begging all your friends to come take some of it off your hands. But it is a cheap way to get started, on prepping your soil. Yes?
What do you use to top your soil off with in your native plant garden?
Okay, so when I've got a soil part of this a little bit later, can I come
Yes.
back to that?
Yeah.
But if I don't cover it when I get there,
Yeah.
ask me again,
I will.
okay? Yes.
Pine needles.
Pine needles, they, they break down in about 6 months, so they don't last very long, and they don't hold a lot of moisture.
Okay.
All right, in the sand hills where there's a lot of the longleaf pine, that's how, longleaf pine needs fire to germinate. I may not know that, but in order for the pine cones to open, they need fire, okay? While, what a lot of people don't know, what's the predominant pine around here?
Loblolly.
Loblolly. The predominant pine here 200 or 300 years ago was the longleaf pine.
The what?
The longleaf pine, the same tree
Oh,
that you see down, they go to the sand hills. When we suppressed fire, see, fire kept the loblollies in check. Okay, when we suppressed fire, now the longleaf pine couldn't germinate and the loblolly moved in. So some people might say, well, the loblolly must be invasive. Well, it was for here and stuff like that, but it was not as predominant. So we don't recommend doing pine needles anywhere near your house because of fire. They can be a quick solution if you've got a disturbed area along the edge of the woods or whatever, and you want to kind of dress it up and then wait for the leaves to fall on and cover it. So there is a place for pine straw, but it doesn't do as much as you would think. One, it's so fluffy that a lot of air still gets into it, and it doesn't really hold the moisture like it is, like it should. So again, it can work in certain instances, but we rarely put down pine straw because of that.
Can you buy leaf matter to put in there?
Leaf mold? Yes.
You can?
Now, a lot of people don't know about it, so you may have a hard time finding it, you know. Sands and Soils out on Stallings Road, they usually have it.
What's the name of it?
Sands and Soils.
Okay.
Now, don't buy all of it, because it ain't gonna pay for us. They do deliver.
Comes in a bag or what?
No, they deliver by, you know, you can say how many yards you want, and they'll come and dump it in your yard. You'll pay a little bit for delivery. Mulch in general, if you can get it delivered,
See?
is about a third of the price for volume than going to the store and buying it in bags. So even you're like, oh, I gotta pay delivery. Well, who's gonna load up your car and get to your house? You know, anyway. And you just, bag mulch is just really, really expensive. Now, if you have a little spot you don't need, but, and I'm gonna give you a little clue, so I know some of you are taking notes. If you need 3 inches of soil or pine bark or something like that for an area, the math says 1 yard, cubic yard covers 108 square feet. I just say round it to 100. So you got 1,000 square feet, you need 10 yards. Okay, so when you call somebody like Sands and Soils, if you measured out, you know how much you tell them you need. All right.
And they just dump it in your driveway?
They can just dump in your driveway. Sometimes you might say, I'm gonna put a cone out here, because I want it right here, or whatever. They can do it if you've got a parking space in front of it along the street, and you go and get it out quick enough, the neighbors don't complain. You know, you can probably do that, but we get almost all our soil delivered from Sands and Soils to jobs, and it's just a really good, like, tell Bonnie out there I sent you, and she'll be happy.
She's in Durham.
Yeah. Rock Shop has some stuff too. You can get some stuff there. I believe they may deliver. There used to be Triangle Landscape Supplies, but I think Site One bought them out. There are other places out there. I like Sands and Soils, just I've been dealing with it for 30 years. And
Yeah, we've got a Site One right down the street from our development.
yeah, you know, Site One, see, because I'm a landscaper, I don't know if they sell to residents or not. They might. I don't know. I know it's me, so they just, yeah, they know me, and I got an account there, and I don't know if they do, but they probably do sell to homeowners, I think.
I think
They are geared a lot towards landscapers, but I think they will. I like Sands and Soils, a locally owned, that's like 3rd generation family run the place, and we call them up and say, hey, we need it, they work us in, but we do a lot of stuff, yes.
So in the city of Chapel Hill sells mulch.
It is free.
Oh, okay.
It's free, for free.
Yes, let me say, You get what you pay for. I can't speak for Chapel Hill specifically. However, when Durham used to do that, because it was right next to the landfill, you were always pulling out plastic out of it because the stuff that blew in and got chopped up in it. And you were always pulling it out of your yard, there. So I don't know what Chapel Hill does, if their stuff blows into it or not. I don't think it's a bad Durham now that they got the transfer station, most of it is hauled away. But it used to be really bad over there with they can't control the wind, it just blew into it and it just get chopped up. And for about 2 years, I did that one time, for about 2 years, I was pulling plastic out of my yard. As I was finding it. All right. But any more,
Do you have to chop up most leaves? Like, is there, like, how big of a leaf do you need to chop up your leaves?
no, you don't.
No.
We'll get more into that in another one, but yeah, you do not need to chop up your leaves. And if I don't cover it, I'm gonna tell you why,
Okay.
okay? Pretty sure I'll cover it, because I got a slide for it. All right, next one. All right. 70% of our native bees nest in the ground, okay? When you got lawn everywhere, they have no place to nest. When you constantly mulch, they have no place to nest. All right. Now here they're suggesting you dig out an area and create a place for the bees. I'm not gonna go to the trouble, I'm sorry. I love my bees, but if an area gets uncovered with mulch, don't worry about it. Okay, that's still habitat. All right.
So like in the garden bed? Like
Yeah, just in
flower
your bed,
bed,
yeah,
And it
yeah.
doesn't have any mulch or whatever, then.
I'm not saying the whole yard, the whole bed, but, my point is don't be anal about it. All right?
That makes it available.
It makes it available for those ground nesting bees. All right? And it shows how they, they're in there, as they hatch and stuff like that and come out. And think about it. Most people around here seem to like to mulch, or the landscape companies, if they have nothing else to do, January and February. All right? Those bees wake up, and now they gotta dig themselves out of 3 inches of mulch to get a bite to eat. They're starving. They got no energy, Actually, I'll talk about this right now. I've found it really, really interesting that our spring ephemerals are wildflowers that usually come up, they're coming up now. They will bloom usually before the leaves even come on the trees, while the sun can get to the forest floor. And when you have something like English ivy, or pachysandra, or lots of mulch, the floor doesn't really heat up. Those spring ephemerals don't know it's spring, okay? So they're just laying there dormant, all right? Most of those spring ephemerals, the flowers are like this far from the ground. But if you're waking up from a sleep and you don't have much energy, how far do you want to get food? Do you want to have to fly up here? All right? Mayaples. Mayaples go about this tall and they have a little flower hangs down and a little apple-looking thing grows in there, and you usually see it in May. Favorite food for the box turtle. Picture that box turtle sitting up there and reaching up and just grabbing that apple underneath there. All right? It's right at his head height to get that. Nature is pretty amazing when you think about how that stuff works. All right? And then, like I say, as the season goes on and they kind of get their energy and stuff like that, they can fly to taller plants, but they need that really low-growing stuff when they come out of the ground to find something, for food. All right, let's see, did I miss anything there? Oh yeah, most of your other bees too don't even sting. And in fact, at one point I had a beehive in my house. I thought I would get some honey. I did get some honey the first year. Only time I ever got stung out in my yard was when one hit me in the head because I didn't realize that they have a flight pattern, and if you get it too close to your path, they can't get high enough to go over your head. You have to put it far enough away from where you're walking. And one hit me in the head, I instinctively went like that, and it stung me in my hand. Most bees are not something to be scared of, all right? In fact, you want them. So yeah, that someone may look like some bees, might look real scary. One I absolutely despise is yellow jacket. They do live in the ground, but they serve a purpose. Usually they, dead animals and stuff like that, they come with that. So there is, I still don't want them in my yard. I've got this really, really scary bee that comes, I see a lot of times in my yard is, I know pretty much that, I see these holes and little piles of dirt around it, all right? And it's a bee about that long, it has a nasty stinger, all right? But it's a cicada killer. And what you'll see is sometimes them carrying a cicada into their hole to feed their babies. They look scary as hell. Like, I do not, but they don't pay attention to me, because they're busy feeding their kids. All right? So as long as they're not messing with it, they're okay. And I pretty much know where they're gonna be dug every year. It's a part of my yard that has a tendency for the wind to blow the leaves off and be a little bit more bare, and that's usually where they are. All right. All right, now we're gonna talk about keystone species. Now, this guy was doing a study about in the ocean, and found if you take out starfish, then the mussels multiply and take over the space and other stuff's forced out. So it just started how you remove one plant and you mess up, usually talk about plants, we talk about one animal and mess up the system. But in the plant world, there are keystone species as well. All right, next slide. All right. So keystone species for pretty much anywhere in the country, the number one tree you can have is an oak tree native to your area. It shows on the top there, white oak. Look how many different species of butterflies, caterpillars feed on those leaves. 436, and it kind of goes down. But these are the trees that kind of are considered keystone. So if you only have room for one tree in your yard, plant an oak. Okay. Now maybe the neighbors have oak. Maybe you plant one of something in the cherry family, like the native plum. Maybe you do a birch. You see there's other things here that you can do. I hardly see anybody plant southern crab apples, but that's a really nice one from the standpoint of spring flowers. A lot of crab apples you see out here are from Asia, so they're not feeding much. But the keystone species are the ones that really feed a lot of insects. Now you notice they don't have any, it says specialist bees. Now that says there's no bees that go to these trees when they're in bloom, but specialist bees are usually bees that like one particular flower or one little family of flowers and stuff like that. So most of your trees really don't feed most of the native bees, for the speak up. It's down when you get down to the shrubs. All right. So here a couple that are keystone that feed a lot are the blueberry and the willows that are shrubs. And then, like I said, you start getting to the bees. Perennials, one of the really big ones to think of, or two of the big ones to think of, is goldenrod and aster, because they bloom in the fall when everything else is kind of slowing down. So you got a longer season for it. So you probably always should try to have some goldenrod or aster in your yard. But you can go online and get this idea of keystone species online pretty well. A lot of times they'll tell you what's keystone in our area, but that's kind of gives you a start. But it gives you an idea why it's important. All right. For the next one, maybe it's that's what I'm thinking. Well, it doesn't have what I'm thinking. So we're gonna get this second. So something like 5 to 10% of plant species feed 70% of the insect population. All right, so that's why I say the keystone is a good place to start. Now, because plants, for example, the monarchs only want milkweed. All right, milkweed is not considered a keystone species because it doesn't feed a lot of stuff. It only feeds, but if you want monarchs, you need milkweed. All right, so you still need to have a wide variety. Doesn't mean you stop at the keystone and you're done, but it's a good place to start to get the bones of your garden to feed it. All right, hold on this one right here, because we, yeah. Who in here has 3 or more kids? Just 1, 2, okay, 3. All right, this is a robin feeding her babies worm, a worm caterpillar, whatever. Caterpillars are the #1 food for baby birds. Okay? Baby birds can't go out and pick a berry off of a tree. Their digestive system also won't handle a berry off the tree, because just like we do the Gerber soft, mushy food for our babies, they want the soft, mushy food too. Now, the people who had, somebody raise your hand and said they had 3 kids. You said you have 3 kids, okay. Most birds have nests, for the time the eggs hatch to the time they can fly and get their own food is roughly 2 weeks for a lot of species of birds. That mama has to, and daddy, has to constantly bring food to the babies for 2 weeks. Okay? So picture your 3 kids. Every time they get hungry, you gotta go to Food Line. Okay? Not only do you have to, you're not bringing them lunch or breakfast, you're bringing to them bite by bite. So you walk over to Food Line, get a spoon in the, does Food Line have the little food where you can order and package it up? I know Harris Teeter does, but imagine, you're going over there and getting a spoon and taking it home. You got 3 mouths here in this one. Some birds have 4 or 5 babies at a time. Okay? How long do you think it would take before you move right next door to Food Line? I mean, you would look like that homeless man sitting out there. But with plants, of any plant, but this is showing a tree, when it grows, it pulls nutrients out of the soil, takes them up to the tree, does its thing, and then drops the leaves. When it drops the leaves, it's flushing out most of those nutrients that it used to build itself. And those go back into the soil, unless you rake them away. All right? Or they blow away. I've talked about my yard. Look at this. When I first moved in, again, the house built in 1901, I'm like, why is the front yard so dry and just so, like, nothing will grow here? And I assumed it partly was years of mulching and stuff like that too, but the first winter, you know, I'm the leave the leaves guy. I left the leaves. Next thing I knew, they were down the end of the driveway where I park. Because I'm on Holloway Street, so Holloway Street's a ridge. It goes down to the north, it goes down to the south. The winds come through there, it just blows the leaves everywhere. All right? And so what was happening is they were always blowing down into the driveway where they got stuck off of it. So sometimes it's not us doing it, it's not us raking the leaves, it's sometimes it's the wind. Okay? But anyway, the in soil, you've got, my dad would be real proud right now, you've got 3 different particles that make up soil: clay, silt, sand. The bigger the particle, the bigger the gaps for water and air. So clay, very, very tight, doesn't drain very well, also holds a lot of moisture better, by the way, but it just is tight. But the 4th particle most people don't think about is the organic material. All right? Now in Canada, they have the peat bogs for years of organic material breaking down and stuff like that. By the way, it's good if you don't use peat moss in your yard because it's destroying the bogs up there to have that. But here, our organic material lasts about 3 years before it totally breaks down. Pine straw 6 months, but you know, it's like it. So if you rake your leaves this year, you rake them up the next year, you rake it up the 3rd year, what do you have in your soil? You've got no organic material been added back to that soil for 3 years. What happens is your soil starts collapsing, okay? Because that organic material with the worms and beetles and stuff like that starting through into it keeps the soil light and airy. It also has most of the nutrients, because those other 3 parts of the soil don't really hold nutrients that well. In fact, clay holds the nutrients so tight, a lot of times it won't even let the plant get it. Okay, the ionic chemistry stuff, so we won't go into that. But if you're holding that way, you're holding out all your nutrition, your soil collapses. Now your tree roots, in order to get the air and water they need, come to the top. Okay? You saw that in one of the pictures earlier in the mulch, where the roots all on top. All right? Now they're competing against everything under there for water and nutrients on there. And so you got this cycle going. That's where sometimes doing the wood chips, coming in there. Now you don't want to put so much over top of the existing roots, but having that, the stuff that's going to be more organic material and stuff like that's going to loosen it. Now maybe get a little ahead of myself on the slide. Go to the next slide. All right. So this is kind of like how, like, believe it or not, soil comes from rock. It's rock breaking down to become soil, and over time, on the rock you get lichens, and then you get, and eventually you get a mature forest. This has kind of, now if you notice, the pH changes as well. It gets more acidic the more everything matures. And we'll get another slide there. Over here, if you have, this is plant succession, you'll probably learn this in like 7th grade or something like that. Maybe remember it, maybe not. But cultivated soil, most of these weeds, and then over time it builds up to a really rich organic soil. All right? So, remember we talked about the clay is what's left here. When we do a job, most of our jobs unfortunately start with a lot of clay. We actually, you see the middle of the bottom, it says 16 years. What we actually do is we usually, the old way of doing it was to till up, like bring in some stuff and till it and mix it in. My question is, why do you spend hundreds of dollars for something to ruin it with clay? Tilling it in, it makes no sense. That wasn't the way the soil was originally. It wasn't, that's all mixed together, all right? There's all the whole thing about soil structure and all that, you mess up when you do that. So what we usually do, we come in with 6 inches of a topsoil, compost, and bark mix, okay? Which if you think about it, that sounds a lot like what would be on the top of the forest floor, where the area where it's getting, the leaves and everything going in, compost, pine bark, leaf branches, all that. And then we come in with a layer of bark mulch, all right, to protect it from washing away and stuff like that. So what we are doing is we are jumping forward like 16 years, building the soil profile up, all right, by doing that. We're not trying to make the clay better, we're building on top of the clay. Because that clay is really a subsoil, not a topsoil. So why would you put a subsoil back on top? You start building them back up on top. All right, that's why the lady asked about the wood chips. That's why that's such a good thing, because you're kind of speeding up the process of building some layers of organic material. And you can actually plant just straight into that after it breaks down and not have to bring in soil. But the whole point is you're trying to speed up the time to get to somewhere here in the middle where things will start growing. All right, that makes sense? Any questions out there before I move on?
Yeah, I have a newish house with a lawn in the back. That's pretty much turf that they put in there. I think it's Bermuda.
Okay,
And I'm going to convert my backyard into a native plant garden. I haven't done it yet. But I think you're talking about the process I'll probably use when it's time to
in that case, I would
create
probably
the
do
beds.
wood chips from the tree service.
Okay.
That's going to be because it's going to be the most cost effective, and you can do it a lot because they give it to you for free.
Right.
Okay.
I would
So
strip the grass off first, right?
you don't necessarily have to if you put it in deep enough on top. And if anything does poke through, you could then maybe.
I'll talk
Okay.
later.
Okay, don't shoot me. I am a firm believer at certain times you spray. Okay, and here's my analogy, and for anybody who wants to shoot arrows at me. If you have cancer, you may choose chemotherapy okay, to get rid of the cancer. Chemotherapy is rough on the body. You wouldn't just do it just for the hell of it, okay? But you may decide to buy a few more years of your life to do the chemotherapy, okay? I see some of these invasive plants as a cancer. And unless you've got a lot of time to go and get it all out by hand, it may be appropriate to use the right chemical in order to make it happen, okay? And this is from a guy who does not, I mean, my dish soap, my laundry soap, all this stuff has no dyes, no perfumes, no nothing. So I'm like, I don't like chemicals in general. I don't eat a lot of boxed processed food. However, because of what I know from the environment and how you probably would never get rid of some of the stuff without chemical use, study, look how to do it. Tree of Heaven, anybody know what Tree of Heaven is? It's awful, but if you cut it down the wrong time of year, it actually gets worse. So if you don't know how to get rid of Tree of Heaven, look it up. But there's a thing they call basal bark treatment where you cut things into the bark and you put a chemical in there so it kills the roots between July and October. You do it any other time, it just sprouts up on the roots. All right? And that's not the only way they figure that you could really get rid of it. Okay? So there is times for proper use of chemicals. And just like the person who has lung cancer, you might do the chemotherapy, but after that he doesn't smoke anymore. Okay? Once you get things healthy, you can live healthy after that. But you may have to use chemicals to get rid of some of the sediments. It's just an unfortunate way of it. The whole thing, vinegar and dish soap, is actually more poisonous than Roundup, believe it or not. It's too acidic. It kills everything in the soil, all the microorganisms and stuff like that. It's too acidic. Huh?
And frogs. It kills frogs.
Kills frogs. It kills, you know, it just like most of the other stuff that people use that they say is just as bad, if not worse, than Roundup. I know Roundup has a bad rap. Most of the time when Roundup's bad is because people use it so much they got on their skin from using it every day, and it's in our food. In a home garden, it may be your only choice. Okay? Now, if you've got woody stuff, like ligustrum, particularly wisteria and stuff like that, don't use Roundup or English ivy. There's another chemical called brush killer. Has no fancy name, it's just brush killer. You can get it and it works better for woody stuff. Privet, yes.
Works on privet.
Works on privet. Now what you can do, now sometimes you can dig up a small privet, or this time of year when the ground's wet, you can actually yank it out, a small one, I'll be up in there. Yeah. But if it's too much to dig up, or if you've got a slope that you don't want to wash away the erosion, you can cut it off, have that brush killer right beside you, full strength in the bottle, and put it on the raw cut. And it will go into the roots, and you don't have to dig it up. You might get a little bit of sprouting back, and but it's, you know, so the right chemical at the right time will save you years of work.
I might need some help from somebody from Keep Durham Beautiful or something, but there's an exchange thing that somebody does that he dilutes certain chemicals, puts them in a little bingo dauber, and we used this yesterday. We're cleaning out one of the parks. We cleaned the privet, daubed around the top, but it's a diluted chemical, and
After you cut it,
yeah, you know, we cut it down
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
sun,
it's
and
probably
then daub
safe.
around, but it's kind of it's not as bad as a lot of this stuff, but it keeps it real simple.
It's
and
like I
feels-
say, it's
Yeah,
diluted.
yeah. So
It's still very concentrated, it's like 22%.
yeah, it's probably what I'm talking about with a brush killer, where you put it on full strength without water. It's probably
yeah,
a very
there's a
similar
guy who
process.
has a program called the Something Exchange, where he'll send it to you. You can use it kind of for privet and those kind of things to just daub around it. He'll refill it about 6 times, and it's $10.
Right.
But it's more kind of a safer, more effective, just kind of keep it concentrated in the area, and not having to go the Roundup route or that kind of stuff.
So here's another thing too, and just a second, hold your question. I want to say this. Do you know why Roundup, a lot of chemicals, are in a bottle you can't see through? Because the UV rays will break it down. Okay? So a lot of this stuff, when you spray it out there, the UV rays break it down pretty quick. All right? So one of the biggest classes I ever saw
So we have to get our CUs every year at Green and Growing Show in Greensboro. And they have these big ballrooms, they have classes, and you gotta go and get like 8 every year and stuff like that. And it's like a 2-day thing, and you sit through and you listen to people. They had one class maybe 6 years ago. It was called, "Your customer doesn't want Roundup, now what?" It was standing room only. I mean, the crowd, every seat, and people lined along the walls down the whole thing, because everybody hears this. And they showed that, you know, even, you could drown in water. You ever heard of, what do they call it, dry drowning? Okay? Pretty much everything out here in this world can kill you.
Yes.
All right, at the wrong concentration. All right? And he went into like the stuff with the salt and vinegar, or the salt and dung dish soap, or vinegar and dung dish soap and all that. And he showed how chemically they were actually worse because they stayed in the soil longer, because the UV rays broke down the active chemical in Roundup. Okay? So, you know, it's literally choose your poison. You know, you have to choose, you know, what you're gonna do. Salt kills it for long, like forever. Okay? You don't want to do salts. All right? And I'm gonna get into, actually, go to the next one. Go ahead with your question.
So it's back to the soil question. You said put 6 inches of topsoil on top of clay. How do you keep it from washing away? Do you have to like?
You put the mulch on top.
Immediately? Oh, you do mulch on top of it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
To hold it in space. And plant it.
Yeah.
Plants the whole soil. All right. I found this graphic really interesting because I started questioning myself. You know, a lot of our non-native plants come from down here, where you see this kind of pinkish red in Southeast China, or Southeast Asia, I should say. Look how red, now this is like the more acidic the soil is, the redder it is, the bluer it is, more affluent. Look how red the Southeast United States is. Okay? Probably the only place redder is South America, if then, and I kept from side by side to see if it really is. That's because, again, the Southeast forests, long-term, they say the Appalachians are one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world, so the soils have built up for a long while and got more acidic. A lot of our non-native plants that we use in our garden come from here, where it's not quite as acidic. And that's why when you send your stuff off to NC State to soil test, they say add lime. Because they're trying to get these plants that don't want it quite acidic to be happier here. Don't bother with soil tests. Unless you're doing a vegetable garden, you might. Okay? Because if you're trying to grow native, you want this acidic soil. All right? And this stuff over here, that might be why they don't go to seed as well, because maybe the soil is just a little too acidic for them here, or whatever, you know, stuff like that. But that may be why, you know, but don't worry about this whole thing about going and get soil tested in lime. All right? Any question on that real quick, because I kind of
Can I back up just a little bit? I want to go back to the brush killer thing.
brushed on it.
Yes, so the name, you said the name is brush killer, so is that by ortho, or if you
Yeah.
go to Walmart, it
Fair.
says brush killer, is
Yeah,
that
I
the same
think it's
thing?
fair.
Okay.
Iowa Advanced,
Okay.
Sorry, what?
Iowa Advanced.
BioAdvance is one of, yeah, I think
It's
that
at
might be
Lowe's
right.
and Home Depot.
Okay, living,
Home Depot?
Yeah, at Lowe's, yeah.
Thank you.
actually, that's a good thing I need to go back to. The main chemical in brush killer is called trichlopor. Don't worry about me, don't ask me to spell it. Roundup, because of all the bad publicity it's got for glyphosate, now some Roundup is trichlopor. All right? You have to look on the bottle and see which one it is. All right? Glyphosate works for like grassy, you know, perennial type stuff, you know, things like that. Trichlopor works better on woody stuff. Okay? Trichlopor will work on the other stuff too, but you know, they have started recently starting to change where you got 2 different formulations of Roundup, so you might have to look and see what's on the bottom.
One more quick one. Covered up in bamboo, acres of bamboo.
Move. All right, so, yeah, you'd almost have to get somebody there with a machine to really get it out,
Part of it.
unfortunately, yeah.
The only way to jump it was 2 foot down with a plastic barrier, and I can't do that everywhere, so. I like to joke that the reason
Bamboo takes over here because we don't have panda bears. We also don't cut it and make wooden screens out of it. We don't use it for furniture. We don't, our culture, we don't use it. Actually, it reminds me, let's go back to the, no, you don't have to do anything. I'll move back in my conversation to, who here has ever eaten tarantula? How about escargot?
Yes.
A couple people that eat escargot, okay? Though, in France, escargot, snails are food. We don't see it as food, most Americans don't. And we definitely, I've never found an American yet that eats tarantula, okay? But there are countries that they do. The non-native plants are your tarantula or escargot. The caterpillars don't see it as food, just like we don't see certain things as food that other cultures do. That's a big way to think about it, why they're not as good. It's like, I like to say, I really don't want to ever eat at McDonald's again in my life. But if I was traveling across the country and the only exit, all they had was McDonald's, I eat at McDonald's. All right? And sometimes that's what deer are doing now. They're eating some things they don't usually eat because they have to eat something. If nothing is eating your garden, it's not part of the environment. I had a customer a few years ago, she's like, oh, I want a pretty front yard, but I don't want anything planted the deer will eat. And the deer out there, this is not Farrington Village, the deer are so friendly, they sit there and look at your car, you roll down the window and have a conversation with them, they just like, look at you. I mean, they are friendly. And we had done several jobs down there, and I was just tired of that question. So I was a little bit, maybe not politically correct. And I said, how about we hire a bow hunter, because they're going to allow guns out there. And I said, we'll hire a bow hunter to come out here to kill the deer. Oh no, I love the deer. And I'm like, but you're okay with them starving. And she just looked at me, I said, that's what you're saying. You want to see their ribs. Okay? We can't plant saying, no, we don't want anything to eat it. Okay? Now, if you've got a high deer population, you have to be selective. And there are some techniques you can use, and I don't want to really get into that today, but you got to have food for nature. All right, let's go to the next one. Or we'll be here till 2. Yeah. All right. This is something people were talking about earlier about the soil layers and what's living under there. You see there's caterpillars in that first layer right there. It says middle layer, but it looks like the first layer there. Then you see the cocoon wrapped up in a leaf? That's why you don't shred your leaves. Okay? Turtles bury down a little deeper to like hibernate for the winter. Then you got your grubs and snails and stuff in there. And it tells you like how many species of stuff live in there. Okay? That is habitat. Who remembers catching lightning bugs as a kid and putting them in a jar? Pretty much all of us. Do your grandkids get to do that? Occasionally you will, but they're not like they were when we were kids. Okay? Lightning bugs live as larvae in the leaves for 2 years before they start flying. See this habitat? Don't chop up your leaves. Don't cover them in mulch. You're suffocating them. You're killing them. That's why we don't have lightning bugs like we used to. In addition to that, mosquito sprays, all that other stuff. We're doing a lot of things, but this is a big one. There's no habitat for them. All right? Make part of your yard totally natural and wild. And in fact, if you have small branches that fall down, make a little brush pile. Rabbits will live in there to hide from the hawks. You don't have to haul everything away. Create those little pockets of habitat. And make sure you leave part of your yard totally wild.
Are all leaves the same? So for example, if you have oak leaves and bamboo leaves,
Well, get rid of the bamboo.
yeah, well,
Point blank.
it's not gonna happen, but okay.
I would strongly encourage it because even if you keep it under control now, the next homeowner may not. All right? And you can drive through places where, like along Duke Forest, where the bamboo is just spreading into it and nobody's taking care
That's
of
what
it.
it's doing where we are, and even if I take it all out, it's gonna come from the neighbor's yard.
Just a minute. Let me cover that. I'm glad I'm feeling time flies, you're having fun. I'd say maybe 15 years ago, we had a project over in Watts Hillendale. Long skinny yard, kind of in proportion to this room. House was probably right about here, parking spot here, and from here back was nothing but bamboo. And they're like, we want a backyard. Their neighbor had bamboo, another neighbor had bamboo, the 3 neighbors back here all had bamboo. All right? We're like, you really need to get rid of this bamboo. All right?
You might have been in our yard.
Does it sound bamboo? We weren't in your yard. Okay. What we suggested is like, hey, talk to your neighbors. All the neighbors wanted the bamboo gone, but they were afraid to do it because the neighbors had it. They all went in together and paid a company to remove the bamboo from all 6 yards. And now they all 6 have backyards. Don't be afraid to ask your neighbors, because they may be looking at you, waiting on you. Okay? That goes for English ivy, privet, anything that's going in your yard. At least you know how to control the problem. And sometimes what will happen, they're like, why'd you cut all that down? It's like, oh, it's invasive, we're taking it off my yard, it's bad for the environment. Really? Oh, I should get rid of mine too. You see, you can educate people on doing it. Now, it may cost money and it may do it, but I would strongly look at options and say it's not necessary, because sometimes people are waiting for somebody else to start.
So can I leave the bamboo leaves, or?
The leaves are okay, you know, but get rid of the bamboo if you can. All right. So, I tell you something. We feel strongly enough about invasives that if we go to a house and the customer says they want to keep their Bradford pear, we walk away. We don't do the job. If they say they want to keep the English ivy, we walk away. We don't do the job. Okay? And guess what? A lot of times when we say that, they're like, oh, it's that serious? Well, we want you to do the yard, so okay, we'll cut down the Bradford pear. Because they realize if it's important enough that we won't get paid to do the rest, that we'll turn down that money, it must be important to us. And then a lot of times they will do it. So just put that out there, that maybe your neighbors are waiting for you.
So a question about the woman who had lawn she's trying to get rid of. Cardboard,
Cardboard kills everything underneath it.
does it?
It cuts off air and water again.
So you're really non-advisable even sort of? as a
Not really.
short-term-
I mean, it might make you feel better a little bit. You know, you still have to look at like whether or not the cardboard has a little plastic, you know, like the little wax coating and all that, stuff like that. But actually, I think it's the next slide. Okay. And I'm going to go there and add fabric to that. Okay? Cardboard and fabric all do the same thing. Remember we talked about the nutrients going up and down where the beagles are? You've got an artificial barrier there. All your soil underneath your cardboard or fabric now starts collapsing. It's not getting air or water. Everything that's under there is trapped and can't get out, and it starts dying. All right? So it's not, you know, that was a kind of a way that for a while people thought would really help.
Well, like the bamboo, it's hard.
I know that.
It's hard. It's
Life is hard, but yeah, it's like you have to choose your battles. It's tough. I'm telling you what is ideal for the environment.
And I guess I'm trying to get a
You
sense
can, I educate you decide.
you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is trying to use cardboard if it can effectively get rid of?
It's not as bad as the fabric because it will break down a lot faster. If it's only, if you feel like it's the only way you can get something coming up through, here's the problem. Like, for example, the lady asked about Bermuda earlier. When you do cardboard, unless you overlap it by 6 or 8 inches, that Bermuda finds a way to get out here and come out. And you still have it. And you spend all the time going and finding all the cardboard you kind of in all the dumpsters to do it, and you still got the bamboo, or Bermuda. All right. So it's tough. And again, it's really easy for me to spend your money, but there are companies that remove bamboo.
10 minutes.
We got 10 minutes? Oh, wow. All right, let's see what the next slide is. Okay, so this is the basic, you know, shrink the lawn, remove invasive species, plant keystone, creates a soft landings under the trees, leave the leaves. We didn't really talk about nighttime pollution, but that is also important to like make everything happy. It's like get lights with motion detectors, you have the lights outside. I want to take a BB gun and shoot out the lights, the street light outside my bedroom window. Before the Duke Power came and replaced the light, I had a dark bedroom, but you know, that's part of it. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, Homegrown National Park. This is a movement where there's something like, I think it's 20 million acres of lawn in this country. If everybody reduced their lawn by half, we would have the equivalent of a national park of 10 million acres. Okay? So reducing lawn, even if you don't take account of all of it, taking half of it and turning it over to native plants and pollinators and stuff like that is the equivalent of a whole nother national park.
You need to talk to developers about that.
Yeah.
Okay, we were going to talk, somebody asked a question about HOAs. For the next one, we're going to, most of these we can go through. This guy, Doug Tallamy, have anybody heard of him? If you can get, if you buy no book at all, buy this book. Okay? It's the whole idea of doing stuff in your own yard that will save the environment. Okay? You ever heard the saying, think global, act local? When it comes to saving the planet, you can't get any more local than your own yard. And so, great book. If you get a chance to hear him talk, he's come to Cary recently. He comes around to North Carolina. He's out of Delaware, but he comes here on a regular basis. Go listen to him talk. He's a bug guy. He rattles off names of bugs that you can't spell, but he's entertaining. Next one. All right, so now, you know, because of time, we don't necessarily need to go through these, but I wanted to talk about, somebody asked about the HOA during the parade, and rules on here. So these are some of the perennial gardens we've done, different things, you know, and Doug Tallamy talks about this. If you want to do a pollinator garden in your front yard and you're worried about the HOA, become a certified bird habitat. New Hope Audubon Society can help you do that. Wildlife habitat. Homegrown National Park, you can get signs for that too, put in your yard. Sometimes when you just put a sign in there that says, bird habitat, oh, okay. And the HOAs will leave you alone, or the neighbors that want to complain. Not always, but sometimes just showing that it's not just a weed patch, but it's feeding something, can make a difference. Doug Tallamy has a slide where he shows a little patch of wildflowers, and he's like, weeds. And then he shows the next one, and it's got a little picket fence around it. Garden. All right, so sometimes it's presentation. Go to the next, I think it's the next slide here, or go to the next one. Next one. We're going through these fast. I want to make sure you get to see the video. Yeah, slopes are a really good place. Go back one. Slopes are a really good place to not have lawn and just do natural. That's going to trap the leaves up there, stuff like that. All right, go to the next one. Go on. We're really going to fly through these. Even little tiny spaces between buildings can be a native plant habitat. Go. There's one in particular I want you. Next one. Next one. Oh boy, I thought it was in here. Okay, next. Okay, no, go next one. That's a slope that's really hard to do. Wow, maybe I missed the picture. Oh, there, no, here, it's the next, this one right here. Next slide. This one. Now, this was the HOA. They wanted a very clean look. They wouldn't let us get rid of the crepe myrtle, but we got rid of the non-native shrubs, so we're hiding the front porch and planted native. Okay, sometimes you can do little things like this that makes it acceptable to the HOA.
What grass is that?
I think that's white muley grass.
Say again?
White muley grass. Most muley grass you see is pink. I believe that's a white fine one, because that's what they wanted there. Semi-evergreen works really good. What?
No, please give a lecture to Lennar.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you know, we have to deal with that a lot of times with the HOAs. And sometimes you can do it, again, sometimes the signage can do it, and you get I actually was, right before COVID, I was supposed to give a class out of Briar Chapel. Yeah, Briar Chapel, because they wanted to go back to the natives, which is what they originally were supposed to be. COVID shot it down, but you know, sometimes the neighborhood
we'll get enough people in there that want to make a change. And there's another retirement community out east, southeast Durham, that's doing the same thing. They are organizing people and get them to kind of start fighting. And a lot of times you can just post stuff on the neighborhood listserv, like, oh, we need to pollinate, or, you know, kind of educate, you can share pretty pictures, and get people kind of like, and you can get a grassroots effort, no pun intended, to do it.
This is lovely. Is that a riverbed stone on the edge in the front?
Yeah,
I love the way
yeah,
that's designed.
just to give it a really clean look.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll use a low evergreen carex along the front that will keep it kind of tight. Carex is like a grass-looking like plant. You know, you can tidy it up.
It is
I had
lovely.
a customer one time, we were trying to talk about the fact that he needed to be at least 70% native, and he was like 95% non-native in his yard. I said, well, if we don't get rid of these, we gotta create more native plant areas and stuff like that. He's like, well, when I think of native, I think wild. I said, every plant you got in your yard was native, is native somewhere, is wild in the woods world somewhere. Non-native plants are still wild, somewhere. It's how you design them, how you arrange them. That makes sense? Do we have time to play the video?
5 minutes.
It's about a 5-minute video, if anybody has to walk out. It's another thing, we got, leave that, and then it's on the disc, so when I moved to my house 22 years ago, the backyard was, it was just overgrown, it was a jungle. And I went in there and started cutting out all the invasive plants. I had pretty much every invasive plant you could find in Durham, except fortunately I did not have bamboo. I had wisteria that's big around as my arm going across there. It took 3 years of cutting brush killer and stuff like that before I even dared plant something, okay? When I got done removing all the invasive stuff, I have one tree left. It was a damaged hackberry, it had some storm damage in it, which I eventually took down. I hear, okay, yeah. You hear the birds already, so you can't hear sound.
Yeah.
I know he's gonna hear sound because that's one of the biggest things about it is the bird sound. This is, you're gonna have a hard time believing if you look at this. The people, has anybody been to the garden tours in my yard yet? You have? Okay. People think it's a full acre. Inside this fenced-in area is 0.18 acres. And you're about to go, if we get the technology to go, because I want you to have some motivation